hello there.
Hello.
Happy Sunday, friends, lovers. Happy. Let's talk about that. Happy Sunday, friends and lovers, and thank you for joining us. This is another 5 minutes with Robert Nasir. I am Robert Nasir. I am joined, as always, by my lovely, gracious, and reasonably happy co-host, Amy Nasir.
Hello.
And we are so glad you are here. Today is Sunday, May 2nd, 2021, the 122nd day of this, the best year of your life, with just 243 days left. 243 days remaining to make it so. There are 237 days until Christmas. So start making up that Christmas list. And then to heck with waiting. Get to making those Christmas dreams come true right away. And today, and sort of yesterday, well, there's just 182 days left until
Halloween.
Halloween. Does that mean we're like
spookiness.
Halfway around the sun to the previous and the next Halloween?
It means that it's Half-a-ween.
Half-a-ween.
Which is celebrated, around that time.
So halfway there.
The 30th or the 1st.
Lemon and a pear.
And so I've got the 'Tis the Season to be Spooky.
Oh.
With my beautiful green smoothie in it.
That's
so
nice.
Delicious.
Good. See, one more reason you should be watching this live on video. Because not only is Amy cute, she's got the cute cup. I'm just going with the black coffee tonight. No beer, none of those unusual holidays that have me drinking during the show. But it is May 2nd, and on this day we wish a happy birthday to Canadian-American inventor Elijah McCoy. The real McCoy.
Elijah McCoy, oh my goodness.
That's right. One of our great American inventors. He invented actually a lot of train-related inventions, including a lubricating device for greasing
the governor.
Locomotive parts.
Yeah, using the governor and the ways to grease locomotive parts.
That's right. Apparently it is apocryphal that the expression the real McCoy comes from using only Elijah McCoy's real lubricating devices, because there was a Scottish expression that came before that.
Really?
The real McCay, that's what it was. And
so what did he invent?
So people, reinvent. That's what I'm thinking. People are saying, well, the real McCoy wasn't really from that, but I'm thinking it was a reinvention of it. Mm-hmm. So I'm going to stick with the real McCoy. Incidentally, not only was Elijah McCoy a Canadian-American inventor, he was also a Black American inventor.
Yes.
So although we're late for Black History Month, we don't really care that much that he was black. Other than that, just makes it a little extra cool.
My friend Tony actually does a really amazing dramatic presentation of Elijah McCoy at Greenfield Village. In the Henry Ford Museum.
That's right.
And, oh my goodness, I can't wait until we have dramatic programs again in Greenfield Village. But honestly, ours is the best. I just got to tell you.
Yes. Yeah, Elijah McCoy had 57 U.S. patents.
Yes.
We did have a patent system back then in the 1800s, and I don't know much about his wealth, but hopefully that made him a rich man. Also on this day, May 2nd, it's The Rock's birthday. Dwayne Johnson.
Ooh,
oh my
really?
gosh. Widely considered one of the all-time greatest professional wrestlers. I've never seen him wrestle. I don't really do wrestling, but I've seen his movies, and he's
so good.
We talked about the television series Ted Lasso and the television series Emily in Paris, and I was asking for recommendations of that kind of optimistic benevolence. Mm-hmm. Dwayne Johnson brings that to his films.
Yes.
And it's crazy because he does action films, like, the Fast and Furious, the recent Hobbs and Shaw. Mm-hmm. Hard, gritty action movie. And he's still that super nice guy that you want to meet this guy and hang out with him.
He's like the super uber nicer Bruce Willis, who's much...
He's kind of like Bruce Willis / Arnold Schwarzenegger, except he looks even buffer than Schwarzenegger ever was. Maybe not in the Mr. Universe days, but certainly as an actor, he's outrageous.
I think if he ran for president, he would win.
He should run for president.
Yes, he should.
We've had entertainer presidents. Ronald Reagan comes to mind. And, governors. We've had professional wrestler governors. So why not The Rock? 48 years old today. Happy birthday to Dwayne Johnson. What a hero. And I mean that. He is a hero. There's a link to his Twitter in the show notes for today. Take a look at just the day-to-day stuff he does is so cool.
Oh, yeah.
Talk about a guy
on
you
Facebook
want to meet.
And on Twitter and other places. Nice person.
Yeah.
Nice.
I mean, he's also
nice
the
guy.
highest paid actor in Hollywood right now, so he has reason to be happy. But he was like that before.
Yeah.
So cool. Today is also International Harry Potter Day, so
yes.
if you've got them, read them. It's not coffee day, but it's coffee day for me. International Harry Potter Day, May 2nd, was actually declared officially by Prime Minister David Cameron. May 2nd would be forevermore be known as International Harry Potter Day. Now, why May 2nd? May 2nd was the day of the Battle of Hogwarts.
Yes.
Yes, also somebody was killed that day. Several people were, but one in particular. We won't say who, no spoilers, but it is International Harry Potter Day. Smoke them if you've got them, but no, read them if you've got them. So what are we listening to this week? What I'm listening to, or what I listened to, and I put some notes about this on Facebook, Yaron Brook did a show called Yaron's Rules for Life. And I was kind of looking forward to that. I did a Rules for Life myself after Jordan Peterson did his 12 Rules for Life. My 12 rules were, number 1, think rationally. Number 2, act accordingly. And then I think number 3 was dance, number 4 was swoon, number 5 was romance. And all the rest of them were just kind of effects. I really only had 2 rules for life. Just
important.
Think rationally and act accordingly. So it was fun to see Yaron Brook do his rules for life. Link is in the show notes. He did a good job with it, except he had to relabel it part 1 because he only got through 4 of them. And he says at this point in his crib sheet, in his notes, he's got 13 so far, but he may be consolidating. So, but listening to Yaron Brook do his rules for life, it was very optimistic. It was very positive, but it kind of connected to other conversations I've had over the last week or two, and there's been a series of unfortunate events, to steal a book title for another book I've never read. In this case, there were personal challenges like my 2 bicycle accidents and my Easter morning disaster, and my broken finger and my hand surgery, or not surgery, but therapy and dentistry. I went to the dentist, and they're like, this crown should be replaced. And then these discussions, and Amy kind of overheard some of these were on Clubhouse, some of them were in Zoom meetings. And for some reason, I'm getting caught up in discussions about determinism and the future and pessimism and modern romance and tolerance and intolerance and masks and the left and the right and the future. And it left me, on top of all the personal stuff going on, it left me this week kind of sad.
Oh, let's make Robert happy, everybody.
Which is strange. If anybody's watched the last 59, now 61 episodes of this show.
61?
Well, this is officially episode 60, but remember we started with episode 0.
Right. Okay. Well, that's quite an accomplishment, folks.
Yes.
We're not leaving anytime soon.
No, 60 is just the start in our quest to get up to the magic number of 67. Yes, I just pulled that out of my hat. We're reading Chris Land's book, Why Funny is Funny, and that throwing the monkey in the wrench, the matching the expected and the unexpected is I guess it's on my mind. But yeah, I've been down a little bit the last week or two, and people have been, not any of the listeners to this show, you guys are great, but people have been piling on.
People are a little cagey.
Yeah. They
need to do some meditation or something.
Yes. I had posted on Facebook earlier this week. Somebody brought up in one of the groups, and this is probably one of those positive psychology groups. I'm subscribed to a bunch of strange groups. And somebody asked about, regrets, and what's the point of regrets, and should you have regrets? And So I wrote, regrets serve a purpose. So use them for that. Then, apply the lessons, motivations, wisdom that flow from them. And once you have, and have made any fixes, restitutions, adjustments, or compensations necessary, let go of any lingering guilt. Just as you don't carry on your shoulder every textbook you've ever learned anything from, so too your regrets. Learn the lessons and then get that stuff off your shoulder. Stop carrying it around. And what I realized a little later going in the week is that pretty much everything I said about regrets applies to sadness. I'm confronting the related truth, something that I already know, something that you already know. And that is that just as regret has a cause and has a purpose, so too sadness.
To which I replied, "Grr! I don't want there to be any sadness in the world.
Grr.
I'm really pissed off."
Arg. So what do we mean by sadness?
Yeah.
You know, I'm always going to go for the definition. I'm always going to say, hey, here's what I'm talking about. Well, I tried looking in the objectivist corpus, in the objectivist writings out there. Couldn't find one. But then I realized all I need to do is know what happiness is, right? Go to For the New Intellectual. Happiness is that state of consciousness which proceeds from the achievement of one's values. Thank you, John Galt. Who is John Galt?
Who is he anyway?
So, rather than listen to this John Galt guy, I thought I'd go to Ayn Rand, the objectivist ethics. In psychological terms, the issue of man's survival does not confront his consciousness as an issue of life or death, but as an issue of happiness or suffering. Happiness is the successful state of life. Suffering is the warning signal of failure, of death. Just as the pleasure-pain mechanism of man's body is an automatic indicator of his body's welfare or injury, a barometer of its basic alternative, life or death, so the emotional mechanism of man's consciousness is geared to perform the same function as a barometer that registers the same alternative by means of two basic emotions, joy or suffering. Emotions are the automatic results of man's value judgments integrated by his subconscious. Emotions are estimates of that which furthers man's values or threatens them, that which is for him or against him. Lightning calculators giving him the sum of his profit or loss. And that's consistent with, I remember reading Edith Packer's essay in which she takes each of the various emotions we feel and explains what causes them. It's very valuable if you can find that pamphlet anymore. I'll see if I can find a link to... try looking on capitalism.net, George Reisman's website. I think he's got Edith Packer's old brochures there. But the point is, happiness, we know, is that state of mind which proceeds from the attainment of our values. Several rational psychologists, including Edith Packer, have gone on to say, well, sadness is that state which proceeds from the loss or the perceived potential loss of one's values. Just as anger is the emotion that follows from the perceived injustice or assault on your values. So if sadness is that which follows a loss of values or potential loss of values, what is the value that I feel that I'm losing? Well, I've been in a lot of pain, as I mentioned, since the accidents and the hand to therapy and all that. But whatever, I've been in that before, and that's what ibuprofen and acetaminophen are for.
Acetaminophen.
But yeah, the discussions lately.
Yeah, well, I mean...
The kind of cynicism that's out there, the kind of despair.
I try to turn that off and look towards to the happy world of true crime.
The happy world of true crime. Usually at the beginning of the show, I'll always ask, well, what are we listening to this week? And Amy has told us several times, but even when she doesn't tell us, it's usually the case that one of the things she listens to regularly are old-time radio shows and even modern true crime shows.
Right. You know, I did hear that Andy Bernstein is going to be, he has a little contract going for some dramatic presentations, audio-only dramatic presentations for some of his books that he's written.
Andrew Bernstein, who has written on heroism, who has written on history, who has written on so many things, has also been writing detective fiction.
We were very, very grateful and very, very blessed that, you know, in a secular way, to read some of Andy's works a long time ago. I mean, he's not only has he written Heart of a Pagan and Dearth of Eagles and some other fiction works, he's written a lot of short stories based on kind of like, I don't know, what would you call them, like hard-boiled, you know, stories of gangs and things like that.
Yeah,
you know,
but what he's writing now are full novels.
Yeah.
These are detective novels based on the character he's created, Tony Just.
Right.
And he wrote a post recently. I won't give too many details since it was friends only, although I don't know if that was on purpose, but he does have a contract to produce a series of dramatic audio podcasts based on the detective series he's writing. So that's going to be great fun.
Yes.
And hopefully you will find those as compelling, or maybe even more so, than the true crime and old-time radio shows that you so much enjoy.
Yeah, and I've also posted, I did find the capitalism.net Edith Packer things that you can purchase there, some
Good.
of her work.
Her discussions about psychology and in particular core evaluations and the objective sources or the causes of different emotions.
Yeah.
Extremely valuable. Because when you know that sadness is caused by a loss or a perceived threat to your values, a possible loss, then you can do something with it. Then you can actually use these emotions for what they're for. I had highlighted the post announcing this show as the purpose of sadness, and got some great comments right away on that. You know, Carrie had responded, sadness is a response to value loss. So it, in fact, reminds us of how deeply we care about our values. And that is definitely one of the purposes of sadness, is to highlight for us that something we care about is lost or under threat.
Can I interrupt you?
And to appreciate what we've got. So go ahead.
So if anybody has seen the show WandaVision, which I recommend, it's unlike the usual
superhero film?
Marvel film universe. It's very much unlike that. No,
it doesn't get very marvelly until later in the series, and by then they've established something a little deeper than that.
Yeah, it's much deeper. But anyway, one of the characters turns to another character in the show, and he says, what is grief if not love persevering? Which, when I think of it, always kind of gets me a little choked up.
You've done whole talks on the subject of grief and dealing with death.
Yeah. I have actually. But, you know, I mean, there are certain aspects that I haven't really gone into. And that's just kind of like the loss of a loved one and what you do afterwards, and options for having a celebration of life ceremony, things like that, with regard to kind of more the logistics. I've touched on some psychological things in my talk that I did a few years ago at GlowCon, Great Lakes Objectivist Conference. But not quite like what we're talking about today. But yeah, the whole grief thing is, love persevering, or persevering love.
Yes.
But, when you've lost somebody that you love, for instance, whether that's a human or a pet or however, you can no longer turn to them and give them the love that is persevering, which is very difficult.
Yes.
Very difficult.
The challenge of sadness is sometimes it feels relentless. like you've got a hole in your heart that will never be filled again. And other times we overcompensate, we repress it, and we don't let sadness do what it's trying to do. We don't let it serve its purpose. Felix Mueller, who doesn't usually get too touchy-feely, but he commented, catharsis, a lost value needs to be processed out of the expected so a person can keep living without it, which I thought was interesting. And
Wait, say that again. The last part of that?
yeah, Felix wrote, bring it up so that I say it right, a lost value needs to be processed out of the expected so that a person can keep living without it. I think what he means by out of the expected is you need to get used to the fact that it's gone, that it's no longer something that you expect.
Right.
And
that's really difficult.
I'm going through my notes here because I had actually touched on the question of catharsis, which was always a strange concept to me before I realized I didn't really have a good definition for it. And
excuse me.
And Felix is right to bring that up.
I just drank some water that went down the wrong way.
Yeah, the definition that I found is the process of releasing and thereby providing relief from strong or repressed emotions. But I think Felix gets a little more to what the purpose of that is, which is not just releasing the emotions or letting go of the emotions, but letting the emotions do what they need to do, what they're supposed to do. And that, I think, is important. There was an article in Psychology Today called The Value of Sadness. And I won't read the article, but I'll just quote from it real quick. Sadness is a live emotion that can serve to remind us of what matters to us, of what gives our life meaning. And as author Antoine de Saint-Exupéry, you need to say that.
Antoine de
Why don't you read this paragraph?
Okay.
Because you will flog me for saying that name wrong.
As one of my favorite authors, Antoine de Saint-Exupéry, who wrote The Little Prince, Le Petit Prince, said, "Sorrow is one of the vibrations that prove the fact of living." That's unquote. And then it goes on, when we avoid feeling, we often lose touch with our real self and our attachment to it. When we feel our emotions, our lives tend to hold more value to us. We care more, we want more, love more, grow more, and aspire more. The fuller we live our lives, the happier we are, and yet the more poignant sadness we feel. This adds a dimension of meaning to our experiences. That's very true.
Just so. And I've always had a bit of a chip on my shoulder about the Rush song "Losing It." This is strictly for Jennifer's purposes. And it's almost the kind of song that expresses something by contrast, expresses values by contrast. But in a way, that's what sadness does for us. It's just that hopeless sense at the end, that acknowledgement that some sadnesses, some holes don't get filled.
Right.
Sadder still to watch it die than never to have known it is kind of the opposite of my approach to values. I can see why Neil Peart wanted to get that out there, because there are people who are living with that. But man, that's a tough one. It's also a song in 7/4, which is really an unusual time signature, which just makes it that much more difficult to wrap your head around.
Very true.
So yes, lots of good comments in the original thread besides Carrie and Felix. Several people chimed in. Timothy Sandifer, incidentally, mentioned that Thomas Jefferson and John Adams have an interesting exchange on this subject in their letters. And so I've shared the links to these with in the show notes. I'm just going to read a little bit of Thomas Jefferson's letter to John Adams.
Wonderful.
8th of April, 1816. And it's great because these are online both in text format and the original handwritten letters. And a lot of this makes more sense once you realize it's handwritten. The way that they say things, you'll see things crossed out or in parentheses, and you're like, oh, okay, that's why he said it that way, because he crossed that out and then said it differently. But Jefferson writes to Adams, "You ask if I would agree to live my 70, or rather 73, years over again." This is 1816. So this is 8 years before they both died on the same day, July 4th. Crazy. Anyway, you ask if I would agree to live my 70 or rather 73 years over again, to which I say yay. I think with you that it is a good world on the whole, that it has been framed on a principle of benevolence, and more pleasure than pain dealt out to us. There are indeed who might say nay, gloomy and hypochondriac minds, inhabitants of diseased bodies, disgusted with the present, and despairing of the future, always counting that the worst will happen, because it may happen. To these I say, how much pain have cost us the evils which have never happened? My temperament is sanguine. I steer my bark with hope in the head, leaving fear astern. My hopes indeed sometimes fail, but not oftener than the forebodings of the gloomy. There are, I acknowledge, even in the happiest life, some terrible convulsions, heavy set-offs against the opposite page of the account. I have often wondered for what good end the sensations of grief could be intended. All our other passions, within proper bounds, have a useful object, and the perfection of the moral character is, not in a stoical apathy, so hypocritically vaunted, and so untruly too, because impossible, but in a just equilibrium of all the passions. I wish the pathologists would then tell us what is the use of grief in the economy, and of what good it is the cause proximate or remote. Well, I haven't read enough of these letters, but my guess is that Jefferson eventually figured out the answer. It's not that hard to figure out that sadness and grief have a purpose, have a point. But I love the letter. I love the way he's thinking this through. I also love this line, how much pain have cost us the evils which have never happened? Mm-hmm. And you've heard me say that before on the show. The vast majority,
yes,
the vast majority of the things we worry about are never ever going to happen. Most of the things we worry about are never going to happen. Or as Jefferson wrote, how much pain have cost us the evils which have never happened? Ah, yes. So thank you, Timothy Sander, for recommending those letters. Again, links in the show notes. Great stuff to read. Somebody on a chat, this was on Clubhouse, so this was a conversation, said, well, why should we study Plato? So many more contemporary thinkers have taken what he had to say and brought it forward to the future. Here in 2021, we should be reading, more recent philosophers. He mentioned Foucault, I can never say Foucault correctly, or Derrida. We should be even Kant or Hegel. And I thought, well, you're only saying that because you have not read Plato. There's a great Plato reading group on Clubhouse that Gregory Salmieri participates in, and nobody knows more about Plato or discusses it better than he does. And there is so much wisdom to be found there. So reading these letters of Jefferson and Adams are just enormously valuable. But they also provide almost a model for correspondence and for thinking about life, for the examined life.
Yes.
In Socrates' words. And so take a look at those links in the show notes. Extremely valuable. Thanks again, Timothy, for adding that to the discussion. Frank Grail says, and this goes with things we've already said, to make you aware that the other side of the coin is something positive. Well, that's good. That's a better way of saying what other people have said, which I don't like, which is, well, you can't have happiness without sadness.
Oh, right.
Which I don't believe. But I do believe that overcoming challenges does make us appreciate both our good outcomes and our virtues. So just like about regrets, I would say sadness has something to offer you.
Yes.
Sadness is telling you something.
Yes.
And you need to listen to that. You need to find out if there's a lesson there, or if there is advice there, a prompt to some action, or simply an appreciation for your remaining values. But whatever it is your sadness is telling you and encouraging you to do, you need to do that thing.
Yeah.
Learn that lesson. And then let it go. But not until you've done what sadness wants you to do.
Mm-hmm.
People will say metaphorically, you should sit with your sadness. And I absolutely believe that. So I've told you before how to change your state. In any given moment, you could stop being sad. You could be encouraged. You could be energetic. You could be excited. You could be anxious. You could be whatever it is you need to be by changing your focus, your physiology, your mental state. And all of that's still true. But when it comes to your sadness, when it comes to these emotions, I also say sit with them for a minute and introspect and find out where they're coming from, find out what's happening that is causing this feeling. And figure out if it's trying to tell you something or if it needs you to do something.
Mm-hmm.
I shouldn't anthropomorphize in that way. It does cause a bit of alienation to say, your sadness is telling something. No, you are telling you something.
Yeah.
The sadness you're experiencing. Sit with that. Find out what it is. And, as you've discussed, in the case of grief, don't rush it. Let your grief do its work.
Right.
Your grief is working for you. Your grief is helping you put your heart back together.
It's an integrating mechanism.
It's letting you get used to the new reality.
I would say it's an entangling mechanism and an integrating mechanism at the same time.
It is. There's much to it, and the only mistake is to not let your grief do its work. Now grief and sadness and anger and all manner of negative emotions can be overwhelming. Mm-hmm. There may be a time to say, wait, no, stop, I can't do this right now. But eventually you've got to let those emotions tell you what they're trying to tell you, do the work that they're trying to do before you can let them go.
Right.
And that's something I'm reminding myself of this week.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, because your grief wasn't one particular thing. You had to do some introspection to figure out what it is that was making you sad.
Yes.
It wasn't like the loss of a loved one or however, and then it's obvious what it is. And sometimes even then, it's not entirely obvious. There are certain things you still need to untangle. Even after a loved one passes, because you're going to feel things that are going to be intermixed with other feelings that you're not entirely sure where they're coming from. So it's very important to introspect and to write it all down and and see somebody to talk to as well, or even go to a group, of people who are also overcoming their grief.
Yes.
And it's really important to do that. So. Because it is, just as your mind is your conceptual mind is an integrating mechanism, and you're constantly taking things in and you're putting them into the categories that you need to put them into. You need to store them away in a proper way. You need to give them the right amount of value weight in your life, which also entails a lot of integration and thinking.
That's not evaluate, that's value weight.
Value weight.
Yes.
Weight of the priorities of your values, in other words. Thank you. So, when you've lost a value, you need to, first of all, untangle all the mix of emotions. And second of all, like you said, or how was it put, that you have to stop expecting, or how Felix put, you have to re-examine your expectations.
And get used to that new reality.
Yeah, get used to the new reality of
integrate.
Of your value not being there.
Yep.
When Robert posed this to me about talking about sadness today, my first thought was, I hate sadness. Sadness needs to go away and die. I hate it.
Well, yeah, you made the point, and then you read this in an article that anger often comes out of sadness.
If you want to see me angry, just, make me sad.
Well, if you're sad, there can be that feeling of injustice. I shouldn't be sad.
Right.
How dare whatever the thing is make me sad? So there is often that.
It's terrible.
And unfortunately, sometimes the anger deflects, which means you never process the sadness. You spend your time focusing on the anger. And that is something to watch out for.
So should I go? I found a particular article which is really good, which is going to be in the show notes soon. But there's a couple of things out of this article that I want to read. Should we do that, or should we go through some comments here?
Oh, we could do both. Of course, some of the comments are unrelated, but they're funny, so it's kind of hard not to read them.
We have the best comments.
We do. Well, for example, Jose says, I've been meaning to ask, this is just my second show of 5 minutes, why is it 5 minutes with Robert Nasir when it lasts so much longer? And it is true that sometimes we run over 5 minutes, sometimes being one of those funny words. But I noticed he didn't ask, how come it's 5 minutes with Robert Nasir when it could be 5 minutes with Amy Nasir and Robert? So, and that would be a more just question to ask.
Well,
Did you notice how I just deflected there? That was very
nice,
smooth there.
very
In fact, it was so smooth, I'll just jump to the next comment here. I think I've told this story. When I originally designed the show.
Well, tell Jose that, Jose, you need to go back and
Yeah, you need to go back and listen to the other 59 shows.
to figure this out.
It will explain everything, except I'm not sure that it really will. You shouldn't make promises you can't keep. I have to remind myself of that. Originally, I'm not going to explain it right now. I will get into that another time. Jim, of course, pointed out that The Rock, Dwayne Johnson, was excellent in the Jumanji films. I didn't expect a remake it's not a remake, but a reboot or
a sequel or
sequels. I didn't expect these Jumanji films to be that good.
but
Dwayne Johnson is just and
Jack
Black too.
Yeah,
just entertaining in anything that he does. They really were good.
So
it was kind of surprisingly good. Jose does say Yaron has 15 rules. I guess it keeps changing. When he started out, he had either 12 or 13 is how he put it. So we'll see. We'll see where he ends up by the time he's done. As I say, he's only done part 1, and he only got up to 4 of them. So, and he did say toward the end that he's going to try to consolidate some of the rest of them. So it could turn out to be substantially less than 15 or even 12. We'll see. Jim Ashley points out that Captain Kirk has that line in Star Trek V, I need my pain.
Yeah, and I forgot what that was about, and he replies below about why Captain Kirk said that.
There's a bunch of great comments here, but some of them we'd almost need to look them up. But Jim writes that was in response to Lawrence Luckinbill's character, the evangelistic guy who promised to take Kirk's emotional pain away. Yeah. You can't. You can't do that. You can't do that. You can't, because you could, in theory, you could just take the right medications or narcotics and be happy all the time. You could go back to the Woody Allen film Sleeper and spend all day in the orgasmatron. And you just can't live with artificially manipulated emotions and still achieve a reality-based result.
Right.
Oh, Narendra just chimed in and says good morning.
Good morning, Narendra.
He is in a place where right now it's not 20 minutes to the hour, but 10 minutes after the hour, early in the morning. So what were your takeaways, or what did you want to mention from this article?
Yes, so, okay. So there's 4 things. This is an article with regard to how to deal with your anger and not turn it into repression when you're grieving or you're sad in general. And so he talks about, because for me, a lot of times, like, to be personal about it, after my mom passed away 10 years ago, which I still feel, after she passed away, I had an extraordinary amount of anger. And I won't get into all of the reasons why, but yeah, it wasn't fun. It was not a happy little party. Nope. So these are really good. These little 4 things here. So when you get angry, sit down and begin to feel the energy in your body. Rather than ranting and raving, start taking stock of your bodily tension. Once some of the energy has subsided, if it does, whenever that is, ask yourself what you're sad about. usually something specific and quite often completely unrelated to the thing that caused you to be angry in the first place, possibly. So once you've assessed your the trigger of your sadness, it's time to feel sad. I know the feeling of sadness isn't pleasant, and that's why so many of us avoid the sensation. A little trick I learned and teach is to say yes or nod your head when the sensation of sadness is felt. Acknowledging our emotion in this way makes it easier to access. Now fully feel the sadness without judging or commenting. And by the way, all this stuff is very difficult. It's like, 1, 2, 3, 4, but it's there's so many branches out that go out of this, and so much untangling you can do. So the next one, number 3, is once the sadness has subsided, you can begin the process of inquiry. So you can introspect, you can ask yourself what was lost. If it's not obvious, look to the core values that you prize and all of the kindness, fairness, support. Often we get angry when these core values aren't experienced in ourselves or in our relationships. And the last one is patience and honesty in this process will often lead you to the missing value. Now that you've found it, it's simply a matter of going out into the world and cultivating the very quality that went missing in the first place. This might look like being kind to coworkers, patience with your children, or being gentle with yourself when you make a mistake. How often have we talked about that? Regardless of the quality expressed, your sense of power and accomplishment will increase. So this is extraordinarily general. This is not about the death of a loved one or anything like that. It could be that you feel like you're not being appreciated at work or by your loved one, or something else that you feel unjust about.
Well, but when it says it may lead you to the missing value, and now that you find it, it's simply a matter of going out in the world and cultivating the very quality that went missing. That putting it that way makes me think that you can be much more creative. In other words, if you've lost something that can't be regained, there are still things to do about the loss.
Yes.
And even if not replacements, at least other things that can have some quality, some value to you. And I like that. Incidentally, something I meant to mention at the beginning of the show. I am not a psychotherapist.
Neither am I.
Amy is not a psychologist.
Yes.
And we are not telling anybody that you should do any or everything that we're talking about to deal with a serious psychological or personal challenge. So everybody, of course, listening to this show knows that. But just in case, that has to be said. So one of the several conclusions or takeaways from thinking about this, at least for me, sadness has a purpose. Sadness has a purpose, a role to play in the care and maintenance of your values. So don't repress it, and don't fix it too soon. Let it be what it is.
Oh, you mean I can't be angry about it and tell it to go away?
You can. The main thing you can't do is repress it. You can deflect a little bit if that helps.
Yeah.
But let sadness be what it is, and let it do what it does. Let it say what it's got to say.
Yeah.
Let your sadness serve its purpose.
And what is the purpose that it serves? I think there's a few. There's actually many purposes that I can think of. One is that, obviously you have to integrate the fact that you've lost value.
Well, that's the catharsis that Felix is talking about, that process
Yes.
of releasing and thereby providing relief from the strong or repressed emotion. But more than that, the integrating of the new reality.
Right, integrating the new reality. Asking yourself, is there a way to find in the world what I've lost?
And if not, what at least is the next step, the next move? How do you move into the new situation and regain values in some other way?
Right. And that is something that is, I think that's important to your self-worth, your self-esteem.
Mm-hmm.
And, in the article that I quoted, he's talking about, you'll finally have the sense of accomplishment. And I'm like, accomplishment? I thought you just kind of grieved and then the pain subsided and then you go on with your life a little bit miserable. No. You can do a little better than that, I think.
I think so. And there's more to it, and there are more creative ways to address it than that. If you've lost a job, it's very hard when you lose a job, or, God forbid, lose a friend, or a pet,
Right.
or a loved one, to say, well, what's the next value? Some people will say, well, what's the good that could come out of this? I think that's probably a little caustic. That's
Yes.
a bad way to think about
Right.
it. But the point is, what's the next value? What needs to happen?
Yeah.
And one of the things that comes out of grief counseling is there can be a sense of forward movement by finding a purpose related to your other values. In families I know where somebody passed away, for example, the parents who seem to deal best with losing a child are the ones who focus on getting the other children through it, who embrace the value of their children, rather
Yes.
than letting the loss of one of them destroy them.
Yeah.
If you, for families like when we've lost a pet, it's not just a matter of replacing the pet or focusing on your remaining pets, although that can be important too. But more than that sense of needing to be there for the rest of the family, be there for the kids, to be strong for somebody else. You have to be willing to feel your grief. But once you're looking for, well, where do we go from here? Being able to focus on the people who are important to you, the remaining values in your life, the other people or even animals that you love, can also be helpful with that. And that's not a deflection. That's actually focusing on values. The one thing that I would tell people not to do is don't repress, don't deflect. You can use, the kind of means that you use to get through things, but the more that you can make them positive and productive, the more you can be there for yourself, for your family, for your kids, your parents, whoever the other people involved in this particular challenge are. And the more likely that you will come out the other side of this, having learned what your sadness needed to tell you, to teach
Right.
you, and embrace the other values in your life.
There is, Jim says, true, neither one of you are psychotherapists, but you are both people, so I think you know what you're talking about.
I do have some experience being a people, and I've gotten pretty good at it, so, take it for what it's worth. Hopefully it's worth something.
It's one of the things just until today that I thought about this, about my mom and everything in that article, and, that concept of try to go back out into the world and find what you lost. And I thought to myself, well, obviously my mom, she was irreplaceable. But then I started thinking, well, what about her do I miss the most? And I miss, the biggest thing I miss the most is talking to her on the phone and having her, give me compliments and encouragement. And that's what I miss. Sometimes she kind of went overboard, and she would see, my mom was a fighter. She fought like, oh my gosh.
Yes.
She was a single mother of two, and that
She
was
had
it.
a lot of challenges in her life, so she had a lot of fighting to do.
Yeah, and so the thing that I grew up about, with her, and learning from her when I was a kid and everything like that, is you need to fight. You need to fight for your values, but you also need to avoid disvalues, fight against the disvalues. And there was a lot of that, unfortunately. probably I'm sure too much of it. I know there was just too much of that. And that led me to become, a very angry punk rocker as a teenager. And I've had to really kind of like relearn and learn a different perspective about that. But it's an interesting thing because, my mom provided something that...
Well, the positive part that your mother provided
Yeah.
may have been why you sought out philosophy.
Yeah.
And what the hell are the answers to what's going on? But you also sought positive
Yes.
philosophy and positive psychology and actual ideas for living well,
Right.
living a good life. So, my post-it note for the week. Every week I have a post-it note that I put up, and it guides me through the following week.
Mm-hmm.
Helps me learn the wisdom. In some cases, they're simple aphorisms to make improvements in my life. But this week's post-it note says, "Let your emotions do their work." So there's that there.
That's really good.
Let your emotions do their work.
Yeah.
Somewhere between repression and wallowing is a good, healthy, effective emotional stance.
Mm-hmm.
Let your emotions do their work. So my homework for the week.
Yeah.
Every week I try to have homework. You can do the homework with me. My homework is add 5 minutes each morning. So we talked about morning pages before.
Yes.
This is going to be my little version of that for the week. My homework. Add 5 minutes each morning to answer the question, how do I feel?
Oh, yeah. Yep.
Now you'd think, why would it take 5 minutes to answer the question, how do I feel? Well, the assignment is to take a notebook, or in my case, I like legal pads and permanent markers, and write down how I feel, and then write about that.
Mm-hmm.
You'll be surprised what comes out in 5 minutes of, not brainstorming, what's the word I'm looking for? The free flow of ideas. There's a word for that.
Introspection or...
But that process of writing without filters.
Without editing.
Yeah. Whoever knows the word for
Yeah.
that, put it in the chat. But I will, this week, for 5 minutes each morning, be answering the question, how do I feel? And again, I'll do it on paper. You could type it in a computer if that works for you. I'm a big fan of pencil and paper or pen and paper. I think that modality causes you to think differently. But computer's fine too. But yes, if you can just let yourself free flow for 5 minutes, how do I feel?
Mm-hmm.
See what you learn, what you find out, what value you get from that experience. And would love to hear about that. In fact, I'd love to hear about that in the 5 Minutes with Robert Nasir Facebook group. Because reminders, show notes will be posted within 10 minutes of the end of this show into the notes on this video and the one on YouTube. All of those links will be posted. If you're listening to this afterward on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, we're on all of the platforms. You can go to youtube.com/Robert Nasir, find the show notes on the current video, listen to all of the previous shows as well. If you have questions, comments, suggestions, post those to the group. If you'd like to support the show financially, we have a new supporter this week. Thank you, Dale. I'm still late in making a list of all the supporters and reading them off at the end of the show. I will be doing that. Email is coming to you to get your permission for that. If you'd like to support the show financially, you can go to patreon.com/Robert Nasir and make a monthly contribution. If you'd like to make a one-time contribution, paypal.me/Robert Nasir. And both of those links, and this is fairly new, maybe a month ago, both of those links and all the other information you could possibly care about is at robertnasir.com. So thank you for joining us.
And I want to just say a special thank you to our friends in India who are going through some tragic circumstances. Give a shout out to Narendra, who's always a wonderful supporter of ours, and I think Patia and some other folks.
Yeah, Narendra's got a real handle on his own state. He posts that sadness and all emotions make life real. meaningful. And it is you, your sensitivity. Love your feelings, feel them, and also mainly know them.
Mm-hmm. Yes, thank you so much, Narendra.
Outstanding. So again, thank you so much for joining us. We ran a little over 5 minutes today. A little inside joke there. You know, I always promise there will be at least 5 minutes of wisdom, 5 minutes of worthwhile content.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes the challenge is you've got to figure out what those 5 minutes were. But hopefully you got as much out of this show, or at least some small fraction as much as we did talking to you. Thank you so much for being here. As always, we wish you success, and I do mean you, the person listening right now. You know who you are. We wish you success. We wish you happiness. And if sadness is part of that recipe, we wish you that too. Whatever its insights, lessons, and gifts.
Yes.
And as always, we wish you love.